Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Members of the Georgia Chamber, Lieutenant Governor Cagle, Speaker Ralston, state legislators, elected officials, judges, justices, members that are here from local governments as well. First of all, let me say to my good friend Johnny Isakson, I don't think I've ever heard a more comprehensive and effective explanation of where we are at the federal level than you gave this morning, and we thank you for being our state's senator. And I want to second the comments that you made about the great mayor of the city of Atlanta, Kasim Reed, and his help in working with us on projects like SHEP, as well as many others. And thank you, Mr. Mayor, as well. To the Chamber of Commerce, the leadership, and its membership, let me thank you for making this past year a really successful one. We've had the best years of economic development since I became governor that I think we've had in quite a time. A few notable companies that we all remember, of course, include Baxter, General Motors, and Caterpillar, along with numerous others. We did this with your help, and both the public and the private sector are doing their parts to make Georgia the #1 place in the country to do business, and I say thank you to all of you for that. Several weeks ago, the Lieutenant Governor, along with Sandra and I, hosted a reception at the Governor's Mansion to honor the Georgia Olympians from both the Paralympics as well as the Olympics who competed in the London Olympic Games. This was an outstanding group of young people of whom we are all extremely proud. In that group was a young man named Aries Merritt, a native of Atlanta and a graduate of Wheeler High School in Marietta. Aries won the Olympic gold medal in the 110-meter hurdles. You know, unlike sprinters who travel in a straight line with no obstacles other than the lane markers that are assigned to them, hurdlers, as the name implies, must jump over obstacles that are placed in their path. Making analogies between sports and government is always risky. But I want to suggest to you that the business of governing our state is somewhat similar to running the hurdles. As governor, my goal has been to make us the #1 state in the nation in which to do business. And I've made that clear from the beginning because I believe it is the best path to economic growth and the quickest way to get Georgians into jobs. And we are not all that far from reaching our target. For 2 years in a row, we have been ranked in the top 5 for business climate by Site Selection magazine, and we ranked #3 for doing business in 2012 by Area Development magazine. But we still have some hurdles that we must overcome before we're going to get there. This morning, I will focus my remarks on one of the highest hurdles facing state government, that of health care. In Georgia, we've had many successes in the realm of health care. With rising health care costs, we've worked to keep Georgians healthy so that they can avoid some of the expenses rather than react to them when they become ill. We've launched the Georgia SHAPE program as a way to combat obesity in our children. It is a growing problem, as you know, in our state. I proclaimed this past September as Georgia SHAPE Month, during which we emphasize physical activity and proper nutrition for our state's children. In this inaugural year, the Governor's SHAPE Honor Roll had 39 schools achieve gold medal status for their dedicated work in making our state's youth healthier. These healthier young people, of course, generally perform better in the classroom, and many will continue their healthy lifestyles into adulthood. In making these programs an investment in both the economic and the cultural well-being of our state. The State Health Benefit Plan just finished the first year of its wellness program, the largest such program in the country, with more than 245,000 enrollees. We would like to take the next step by developing and growing it. We want to see employees taking responsibility for their own health through preventative actions and receiving lower premiums as a reward for doing so. But even with all of these cost-saving approaches, it still costs approximately $10 million per day in claims to provide health benefits to active and retired employees and teachers of our state. These costs have and will increase because of Obamacare's mandated benefits. In fiscal year 2014, the state health benefit plan is projected to incur $106 million of additional cost due to that federal legislation. And because our state health benefit plan is classified as a self-insured plan, it is subject to the 3-year Obamacare reinsurance tax. This means that we will be expected to pay an additional $35 million in 2015. Of course, even among the healthy, not all illness can be prevented. So last year, we grew graduate medical education by adding funding in the budget for the development of 400 new residency slots in hospitals throughout the state, helping keep Georgia's doctors in Georgia. These are just a few of the great things that we have going on for us in health care, but we also face hurdles that we must overcome, like how to fund the state's responsibility for Medicaid. Right now, the federal government pays a little under 66 cents of every dollar of Medicaid expenditure, leaving the remaining 34 cents per dollar, which in 2012 amounted to $2.5 billion as the state's share. For the past 3 years, hospitals have been contributing their part to help generate funds to pay for medical costs of the Medicaid program. Every dollar they have been paying in has essentially resulted in 2 additional dollars from the federal government that in part can be used to increase Medicaid payments to the hospitals. But the time has come to determine whether they will continue their contribution through this provider fee. I've been informed that from 10 to 14 hospitals will be faced with possible closure if provider fees do not continue. These are hospitals that serve a large population of Medicaid patients. I have proposed giving the Department of Community Health Board authority over the hospital provider fee with the stipulation that reauthorization would be required every 4 years by legislation. They have experience in this area, having had authority over a similar fee for the nursing home industry since around 2004. Of course, these fees are not new. In fact, we are one of 47 states that have either a nursing home or hospital provider fee, or both. It makes sense to me that in Georgia, given the similarity of these 2 fees, we should house the authority and management of both of them under one roof for efficiency and effectiveness. Sometimes it feels like that when you have nearly conquered all of the hurdles that the federal government then begins to place a few more in your path. I'm, of course, referring to the various mandates of the federal legislation known as Obamacare that put a strain on our state, its businesses, and its citizens. Most of you are well aware the United States Supreme Court upheld the individual mandate as a tax. Therefore, most Georgians beginning in 2014 will be forced to get insurance or else pay a minimum of $95 and potentially far more in penalties. So what does this mean for us? It means that Georgians must pay out dollars either for insurance companies or to the federal government, whether they really want to or not. But ultimately, there is still a choice, albeit a rock and a hard place kind of choice. As more individuals enter the marketplace, younger, healthier Georgians might begin to decide that they would rather pay the penalty than deal with the potential higher cost of coverage, causing the price of insurance for everyone to climb. This increase will drive even more healthy individuals out of the market, further swelling the cost. This potential cycle is one of the inherent flaws in the federal statute. The employer mandate means that businesses with 50 or more employees must provide affordable health insurance to their workers or else pay rather large penalties. Costs can increase here as well as the pool of insureds becomes less healthy. These costs stand to hurt even our state's private sector because all businesses and businesswomen know that the higher your input costs, the lower your profits. And the lower your profits, the less you operate, expand, or employ. Whether it's through fewer employees or less equipment purchases or higher cost, this mandate will negatively impact many of our state's businesses and, of course, the would-be employees themselves. Georgians who have already received a paycheck this January have no doubt noticed that their payroll taxes went up and their take-home salary went down. This is the cost of entitlements. If you think your taxes went up a lot this month, just wait till we have to pay for free health care. Free will never cost so much. The individual mandate has a second tier of impact involving Medicaid and its cost to the state. I've said clearly that Georgia will not expand Medicaid under the federal government's guidelines. Even so, in fiscal years 2013 and 2014, Medicaid and SCHIP funding will be the second largest portion of the state's funds budget, with more than 13 cents out of every dollar going straight into one of these programs. And with just the portions that our state must do, Obamacare is expected to add more than 100,000 new individuals to our Medicaid rolls and mandate other requirements, costing our state nearly $1.7 billion over the course of 10 years. And that's on top of the $2.5 billion we already pay annually. The reason? These Georgians qualify for Medicaid under the current system, but have yet to enroll in it. With the individual mandate requiring either insurance or a hefty fee, they will likely think that Medicaid looks pretty good. And since they fall under the current system, the state of Georgia and its taxpayers must pay the current rate of 34% and not the 0 to 10% rate proposed by the expanded population group. We constitutionally, as you know, must balance our budget, a wise requirement that has been instituted by those who came ahead of us. This increase in cost to the state means, however, that we have to find that money somewhere in our already tight budget. We cannot simply create it ourselves. As such, I've instructed the Department of Community Health to reduce its budget by at least 3% in amended fiscal year 2013 and by 5% in fiscal year 2014, a difficult but necessary task. They've already identified $109 million in cost-saving measures between these 2 years, but this hardly covers the additional nearly $500 million in needed funds caused by growth in Medicaid expenses during that same time frame. That means we must make necessary cuts in other agencies and core functions of government, since raising taxes is not an option that I will accept. As I have indicated, I've rejected the Medicaid expansion in Georgia already. But let me emphasize that the expansion would have put our additional cost over 10 years closer to $4.5 billion, and that's operating under the dubious assumption that the federal government, with its ever-growing national debt, would have fulfilled their promises and filled their share. The 620,000 new enrollees would have stretched our resources and our state to its limit. But whether the cost to our state would have been $2 billion, $4 billion, or $6 billion, it does not make much sense to ask for more hurdles when you're already utilizing every muscle in your state's body to overcome the ones that you currently have before you and the ones that you must face. So unless the federal government changes its mind and is willing to block grant the program and allow Georgia to design its benefit plan, I can't justify expanding Medicaid. The irony to me is that there are those in the medical community who are urging the expansion of the Medicaid program, while at the same time we are seeing more and more medical providers refusing to accept Medicaid patients. Their reason for doing so is that they claim the reimbursements for their services are below their cost. It is for that reason that the previously discussed provider fee is so important, since that fee is used to pay providers. If providers are already having difficulty covering their costs for care of Medicaid patients, how will they accommodate the 34% more people in a Medicaid role? If you're losing money now, how do you reconcile the number of patients on whom you will lose even more money? Add to that the fact that the new enrollees would be coming from higher economic scales, and some will be leaving their higher-paying employer-provided health insurance plans to enter the taxpayer-funded Medicaid program with its lower reimbursements for providers. If we have to depend on provider fees now to keep our reimbursements to Medicaid providers at a tolerable level, just imagine the pressure that will come when hospitals and doctors are losing more money on a larger portion of their patient base. Expansion of the Medicaid rolls does not solve the problem. It only exacerbates the one that we already have. As many of you know, I also turned down the federal government's offer to let us put our name on their insurance exchange program. I have no interest in seeing our state's name or its taxpayers' dollars used on something that we would have very little input into designing. If the purpose is to let those closest and most knowledgeable about the population design the program, then we should be allowed to do that. It doesn't appear that the pattern for the exchanges allows that. Therefore, I see no benefit to having a program bearing the name of the state of Georgia, over which elected or appointed officials have very little say-so. While many federal programs come with strings attached, these strings turn states into marionettes to be manipulated by federal bureaucrats. If there is one thing we don't need, it is another puppet show directed from Washington, D.C. We cannot always determine what obstacles will be laid in front of us, but we have to decide how we'll deal with them, and whether you approach them with anger, indifference, or decisive action. The first two provide little in productivity, but the latter offers opportunity to grow our state and our businesses in spite of newfound hurdles. Therefore, we must choose to work diligently. We must choose discernment over acquiescence, which is what I aim to do as I make my decisions. And we must choose to confront those hurdles together, because discussion and debate without bitterness will lead to greater forward progress. Despite all that is in front of us, we will still make Georgia the #1 state in which to do business. And one last note. For those of you that will not be attending in person tomorrow, stay tuned to my 11 a.m. State of the State address, in which I will outline many other issues and plans for the state of Georgia. And if you don't want to be there or tune into that, my staff tells me that I am really getting into the modern age. You can go to my Twitter account. And my staff assures me that they're going to be tweeting my remarks, or at least the good parts of them, anyway. Thank you all for your attendance here today. Thank you for what you do.